Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new Pory Revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, I Got Fired. Employers' lawyers should have done their homework. I did. This happened to me about 20 years ago while in college. I am being deliberately vague because reasons. Background: I got a job basically office sitting on weekends. I showed up at 8 a.m. and every hour I checked over things, handled the occasional phone call, and then left when the 4 p.m. person arrived. Most of the time I read, watched TV, or played games on my laptop. I probably worked no more 10 minutes of every hour unless something went wrong. It went on like this for years. The pay was decent, holidays were double pay, and I even had opportunities to cover weekday shifts when others were sick. One day while I was covering the midday shift, my boss asked me to come into his office. He told me that the evening weekday position was going to become available that night. He offered me the position, which I accepted. I was told to punch out and return at 5 p.m. that night. The reason it went down like this should be obvious. Things went okay for a while. I showed up at 4 p.m., did the normal things, and then left at 12 a.m. when my relief arrived. It was a little more work, more call volumes, etc. Then, after 9 months, things started to go south. The daytime person developed a huge attitude problem and went from a nice person to a total Karen. She would complain about everything I did. For example, one time a system jammed up at a remote site and she called them. 5 hours later I saw the jam was still there, so I called that site again to see if they were still working on it or if something else was wrong, because the woman on our end who would be the one to help them was leaving soon. They did have a problem, and so I hooked them up. My reward for making sure the problem got solved and not having to bother an upper-level employee at home on a Friday, just after having left work? I got yelled at because Karen complained that I had apparently ignored her log entry about the issue. My defense was ignored. The boss had me highlight important things on the log to verify that I had read them. Things plodded on for a while with this new normal. I tiptoed around Karen when needed, thankful for the fact I only had to deal with her for no more than 5 minutes. I did the stupid highlighting thing and my log entries started getting more and more detailed, even referencing Karen's calls when I had to follow up on an issue that crossed shifts. The following summer, just after I crossed year mark, I went on vacation to visit some friends out of state. When I got back, after about a week, my boss came down after everyone had left and had me describe how I did a certain task which involved certain updates. I explained to him how I did it and so forth. He then told me that I had not been doing it at all and that he was firing me. I had transposed the date code of the English file for the French file, which was the previous one. The newest one had already been applied anyways, so nothing was wrong. It was just a reason to get rid of me. So I left the office. My state is an at-will employment state, which means that I can quit at any time for any reason and my employer can terminate me at any time for any reason. The only exceptions were state and federal laws such as race, religion, etc. I thought I was screwed. So I just started applying everywhere I could. During my job search I happened to accidentally stumble upon a link about employment law. Out of curiosity I read it and discovered that my employer had shot themselves in the foot. In the employee handbook, there was a job security clause. What this stated was that they would never lay us off and such if our jobs were eliminated. We would simply be retrained and sent to fill an opening elsewhere in the company. It sounds good, but it resulted in them cooking up reasons to fire people to get around it. But their fancy, high-priced lawyers had missed something. In my state's laws, the ones passed by the legislature, I was screwed because of at will. What they neglected was case law, the ones determined by courts. This site cited a case from the state's Supreme Court that had ruled that a job security clause waived at will on the employer side, turning it into a just cause relationship. This means that they had to have a real reason to fire me. The revenge with that in hand, I sought out a lawyer. After my consultation with her, I set about collecting my evidence. My former boss did not realize that I knew more about this program than he did, seeing as I ran the same software on my own computer and laptop. I experimented. The date of the file, which they tried to use against me, is baked into the version 2. I was able to demonstrate to my lawyer that if I applied the same update over and over, which my former employer stated would change the date every day, would, in reality, display the date of the file. I showed this by backdating my own copy by a year using the update archive available from the vendor. Next, I showed her how the task used to be automated. A script would snag the file and process it every day on its own. A change on the vendor's site broke the script. It was an easy fix, but no one bothered to do it because the guy who had wrote it retired. The fix involved deleting 3 characters on one line in the script. The task was also marked as only being a weekday task. In my firing, I was told how important this update was and so forth. If it was so important, why was it not done on weekends or holidays? The vendor pushed out updates on those days too, as I showed my lawyer the one from Christmas morning. And why had the automation not been fixed? With all that in hand, she contacted them. After presenting them with the law they broke and all the evidence I had collected, they were forced to settle with me. So in the end, their fancy high-priced lawyers did not do their homework. I did. Thank you to the wonderful librarians I have known in my life who taught me my information literacy skills. They paid dividends in this case. Don't want to clean the house? Mum will turn it into a prison. Let's take a look back, way back, to the time of the first stirrings of the year 2000 bug, where people believed that the world was going to end in a nuclear war because the computers were going to hit 00 when the year 2000 came around. It was almost the summer of 1999. I was just a twig of a child, mostly gangly limbs and big eyes, and all of 11 years old or so. Our cast for this tale is A, my eldest step-sibling. N, the catalyst of this tale. M, me, the Bambi-looking gullible and who should have known better. Lou, stepbrother, my age and he should have known better too. K, younger sister by 2 years, and L, the youngest. The baby of the family. Now my mother remarried a man, we shall call him RG, when I was about 8 years old. Due to the whole soap incident, he delegated all forms of discipline to her when it came to punishing us all on a whole. So due to her working long 13-hour days to support us all and the lack of allowance for doing chores, because let's face it, 6 kids tend to run you dry if you try to keep up with it all, we, the children, started slacking off. This did not sit well with my mother, who used her usual threat of, I will go into your rooms and whatever is on the floor, goes in the garbage. This is something we had heard all our lives, but us younger kids, as in me and all below me, totally believed she would do it, until this one fateful day. It was gorgeous outside, the sun was shining, spring had brought new leaves to the trees and all the neighborhood kids could be heard screaming through the streets because the 90s were a time of uncontrolled childhood chaos where parents happily released their spores into the wild and drank wine while they didn't have to think about their hell spawn until the street lights flicked on. Unfortunately, for us, my mother decided that this gorgeous weekend day was best used for picking up the slack that we let get away from us. She demanded we clean our rooms while repeating that well-known phrase we all knew and despised. We groaned, we whined, we relented and started to comply. But then my sister Anne, the stone-cold and wisest of the elder sisters, just shrugged and ignored the order. She and I shared a room, practically having one side of the upper floor, which had a wall knocked down and renovated into almost like a mini apartment sans kitchen, all to themselves, and at the all-knowing age of 13 N and 15 they both decided they had better things to do that day than listen to our mum. Left to go on a date with her boyfriend she made the year before, and N sat in her room on her computer, a giant PC of a thing linked into a separate line so the dial-up wouldn't fudge up our phone systems. When we, the younger kids, started bugging her, shocked at her audacity, my sister N said these words. It's not like she's actually going to throw all our stuff away. She paid for it all, she's not just going to toss it all out because that's a waste of money. This is a home, it's not a prison. She's not the warden and we don't have to do what she says. Then, she left us standing there with our puny impressionable minds totally blown. We didn't have to do what Mum said? Is that even possible? My younger sister Kay and my brother Lou took this at face value and immediately took off. They were 11, Lou, and 9, Kay, and had friends waiting on them. They didn't have time to waste cleaning their rooms on an empty threat. L, only 7 years old, was more hesitant but was as easily distracted as I was, and we ended up playing Barbies for the rest of the day, totally forgetting about our worries until dinner time. Silence. Dinner was quiet, awkward. Mum was upset. The house did not get cleaned and RG was ready to lay his hammer down at my mother's command. The interrogation went as expected and Kay, our more expressive sister, blew up, figuratively, at my mother. This is a home, Mum. Not a prison. And it's my room. With this, dinner was concluded. Kay stormed off. Mum went quiet and with the most Stepford wife smile ever just asked us all if we felt this way. My elder sisters agreed immediately, not really caring because of teenage angst, and we younger kids slowly nodded at their insistent stares. I see. And that was that. No punishments, no scoldings or groundings, and the rest of the weekend went off without a hiccup. We should have known something was up. Mum sent us all off to school Monday herself, which was unusual because she usually woke up before us and was gone by the time we finished brushing our teeth. We then wouldn't see her until dinner later in the day, but she made us a big breakfast, hinted at a surprise for us when we get home from school, kissed us goodbye and sent us happily out the door. Mum's pro-revenge. While we were at school, Mum, RG and some of his friends came in and got rid of everything that would be enjoyable to a child. The basement was emptied and cleaned, all computers, video games, Game Boys, CD players, rodeos and TVs were taken. Dressers and closets were emptied, toys upon toys were tossed, colorful blankets and sheets removed from beds, decorations, pencils and coloring tools, papers and scissors, glue, basically any and all craft supplies, gone. When we returned home, RG was in his military uniform and accosted us as we came in through the door, pinned us to the wall and frisked each of us. Backpacks, candy and everything we had on us was taken. My mother then handed us some grey pajamas and ordered us to march into the bathroom to change. Terrified, we complied. The living room seemed so bare. The piano recorder was gone, along with the TV. The puzzles and games usually kept in the room were gone from the shelves. The bathroom was no better. Bare except for a bottle of Head and Shoulders and a bar of soap on a string for some reason. It smelled strongly of bleach. We were then sat down on lawn chairs, the couch occupied by my stone-cold mother, as we waited for every child to arrive in silence. Welcome to the month of hell. We watched as my mother tossed all our clothes into a garbage bag. All toys and art supplies from our backpacks followed, and RG was in uniform and with his scariest expression as my mother went through our new itinerary for life from now on. Wake up at dawn, physical training in the mornings through the town, lead by RG. Oatmeal with no sugar for breakfast, then off to school. Drop-off made to the classrooms by RG and pick up the moment the bell goes at the end of the day. Lunch is roast beef sandwiches, barely any mayo and wilted lettuce. The school has been informed to not give us anything else and to take away anything not given to us by our parents. Once home we are each assigned a room to clean, our bags taken and checked for contraband. Room clean. Physical training in the backyard, a deflated soccer ball as a toy, nothing else, leave the fenced-in area and you get extra punishment. No friends, calls or escape. Dinner was cold peas, corn, beans, and mystery meat. No butter, salt or ketchup allowed. You don't take care of your home, you don't deserve your home. Welcome to prison. Homework was done at the table, use of pencils and paper regulated and inventory counted. Bedtime was at 6. Lights out at 7 and the doors locked until morning. The bathroom must be used before bed or you have to go in the pot put in your room. It is up to you to keep it cleaned. We had 2 sets of pajamas we went to school in, all grey, and a set for bed. It was up to us to keep them clean. Uniform must be maintained, hair must be maintained, our grades must stay high. No excuses, no exceptions. By the time a week was up she had broken us. N and A had stayed stubborn but even they broke by the 2nd week. Then the appeals. You want release? Write us an essay on why you think you're ready to return to society. Then an interview to determine leniency. My younger sister Elle and I managed to be allowed outside beyond the yard. It took several days for the others to follow. By the end of the month, we were ready to do anything my mother asked us to. Then on the same day as last time she and RG came into our rooms and dumped garbage bags upon garbage bags, every book to every Lego was in there, marked with our names. All our stuff was brought back and my mother dumped them all out onto the floor and said when I come back up here whatever is on the floor, goes in the garbage. We cleaned that crap up fast. We never ignored our chores again. The last one is titled, Don't Believe in Safety First? He does and he'll make you cough it up. I've worked in construction, paving, and mining for years. I was a fabricator, welder, mechanic, laborer, and equipment operator or a combination of all 5 at various times. If you're familiar with MSHA, Mine Safety and Health Administration, then you know it's like OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, on steroids. My dad has decades of experience in the coal, iron, copper, borax, and uranium mining industries and is an MSHA instructor, as well as a pilot. My older brother worked in construction and mining as well and is now the safety compliance officer for a huge construction company. My uncle was a journeyman for almost 40 years. That's a lot of years to be a power line electrician and never suffer a serious injury. Needless to say, we have a rather large knowledge of what is safe and what is not safe. Safety regulations aren't BS. They are designed to keep your fingers attached and your heart beating. Literally, thousands upon thousands of people have been horribly maimed and killed in order to build these regulations into what they are. I detest employers skirting safety for money. Story: I quit my last mining job because the employer was shady as hell, white-collar crime stuff. Yes, they went out of business, and I was tired of the 200-plus mile commute each day on top of 12-plus hours of work in 130-plus degree heat. I began looking for a new job and found a fabrication gig building, maintaining, repairing off-road vehicles. I rather enjoyed the work even though it paid half what the mining did. Fairly large facility with about 40 employees. I had decent co-workers and this was my first job with air conditioning, love AC, however, I couldn't really stand the shop manager, SM. SM was a know-it-all that didn't really know anything about welding or fabrication or safety. I'd say something like, I think we can do this repair job twice as fast if we do this instead, and his normal type of response would be, well, we pay you to work, not think, ask questions, etc. The guy was, and to my knowledge still is, an idiot and I cannot figure out how he got his position. Literally, every time you'd step into his office, he was watching stuff on YouTube or reading a magazine. He never lifted a finger in the shop in my 1.5 years around there, and I have no idea what he actually managed. For about the first year there, each month I'd put in orders for stuff like welding gloves, respirator filters, welding hoods, welding wire, tools, raw materials, etc. You know, stuff they're supposed to supply. In my last few months there, SM slacked even more, which I didn't think was possible, and started skimping on my orders. I'd order 5 pairs of decent gloves, and he would get me 2 pairs of crappy gloves. I'd order name brand parts to repair machinery, he would get me cheap Chinese parts. Other requests were simply ignored and I did end up spending my money to purchase PPE, personal protective equipment, which got old really quick. I'd tell him stuff along the lines of, hey, you can't let people block fire extinguishers like that, or, you can't store those chemicals there, and he'd brush it off like I have no idea what the hell I'm talking about. This is where all the safety stuff I'd learned and been around for decades came in handy. He really started getting under my skin badly, so I wrote up a long list of around 20-25 OSHA violations I found over the course of a Monday and took about 60 photos which I plan to turn into him since his job to fix this stuff. That Friday I went looking for him around lunchtime but couldn't find him, so I went to HR and basically vented to them about SM and about how, because of his ever-increasingly low standards, they are begging for an accident to happen. The work environment had become unsafe and it needed someone to straighten stuff up. I leave HR and go back to work. Around 30 minutes later SM walks up to me and upset. The convo went a little something like this: SM, HR tells me you don't think this place is safe? Me, yeah man, something's gotta be done about some of this stuff. In fact, I got a list for you right here. SM takes the list from my hand and rips it in half. SM, well, if it's so unsafe, why are you here? Me, because I. SM, you know what? You can take the rest of the day off. Me, alright. SM, in fact, don't bother coming back Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday. Me, are you firing me for bringing up safety complaints to you? I start getting a fat grin. SM, yes, in fact. Me, say no more. See you. I gathered up my tools and toolbox and left. I get home and file for unemployment. My unemployment claim gets rejected, surprise, surprise, and I appeal the decision, so the matter gets sent to arbitration a few weeks later, roughly 6 weeks after I was let go. I'm in the waiting room and reviewing all the paperwork relating to my claim, and the first page I see is the company response to my initial claim, which said I was fired for freaking out, being belligerent, and wouldn't say what the safety issues actually were. The next page is their response to my appeal, which said I was fired for being belligerent, and despite my poor attitude they were fixing the safety issues he brought up. I get called into the arbitration room and I'm actually shocked that no one from my former company showed up. It was just me and the arbitrator, very Judge Judy-like lady. She asked me straight and direct questions, I answered truthfully and the whole thing was over in probably 6 minutes. She asked me if I had any questions and I had just one. Why did they say on page 1 of my paperwork that I wouldn't tell them what the safety issues were, but page 2 says they are working towards fixing the issues I told them? The arbitrator went silent for a minute while reading each page and just says, "Huh. You're right." I'm told it'll be about 2 weeks before I have an answer. The next morning, maybe 14 hours after the arbitration, I receive a letter saying my benefits are approved. Plus I get retroactive benefits from the date I was fired, and I'm receiving $100 more each week net income on unemployment than I was making full-time at the company. Fast forward about a year, I saved some of the unemployment money and used it to get my own little fabrication shop going. My dad calls me up one day letting me know that one of his customers that day is an OSHA inspector, and they got to talking about what had happened with my former company, and me and my dad even showed those pictures to the inspector guy. I didn't have a PC or printer at home, so I printed those 60 pics up at his work and left copies there the year before. He said the inspector was appalled by pictures and said he would check it out. Fast forward another year. My little fabrication company gets brought into the fold of the company my dad works at, so they could stop outsourcing mechanics and fabricators, and it'd be much cheaper to have a mechanic, welder in-house. On one of my days off, that same OSHA inspector fella came by and got to talking with my dad again about my former company. Apparently, he did a surprise visit to them not long after he had seen my dad the previous year and handed out somewhere in the neighborhood of $30,000 in fines for OSHA violations. Not fix-it tickets. Full on, pay this or we shut you down, fines. Thanks for listening.